Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Well, it looks like Vladimir Putin is a poker player, and he pulled a bluff, and Turkey called him. And in the process, shot down one of their planes. He shouldn't have been messing around in the Turkish airspace anyhow. But is this going to be some kind of a face-off? I doubt it very much. If NATO will stay strong, and Turkey's a NATO ally, we vowed to defend them. So I know Putin has ordered state-of-the-art air defense missile systems to be deployed at a Russian air base in Syria. But I think he's bluffing, and we need to call it. Wendy?
Well, both countries say they don't want war, but if Russia shoots down a Turkish plane, that could mean more military showdowns that might even involve the United States. Chris Mitchell brings us the latest from that region.
Turkey's President Erdogan said he didn't want to escalate the situation, but he needed to protect Turkey's security and defend their allies inside Syria. Russia's military defense condemned the attack and announced 3 steps it would take after the incident. It said bombing attacks would be escorted by fighter jets, air defenses would be increased, and military contacts with Turkey would be suspended. After the attack, Russia's President Vladimir Putin used exceptionally strong language. He called the incident a stab in the back, promised significant consequences to Turkey, and said Russia would not tolerate such atrocities. Russia's foreign minister canceled his upcoming trip to Turkey. Putin also accused Turkey of collusion with ISIS.
We stated many times the fact that a large amount of oil and oil products is being transferred to the territory of Turkey from the territory seized by ISIS. That is how these gangsters are receiving their financial support.
In Washington, U.S. President Barack Obama urged calm.
Turkey, like every country, has a right to defend its territory and its airspace. I think it's very important right now for us to make sure that both the Russians and the Turks are talking to each other, find out exactly what happened.
Turkey, a NATO member, asked NATO for an emergency meeting. It's the first time in 50 years a NATO plane shot down a Russian plane. It remains to be seen if NATO will invoke Article 5. It states an attack on one member is an attack on all. Turkey and Russia both produced evidence they said proved their version of events. Turkey said the Russian plane violated its airspace after 10 separate warnings. Russia said its plane was shot down over Syrian territory. After the plane was shot down, Syrian rebels produced this video showing them destroying one of the Russian helicopters sent to rescue the pilots. It appears the pilot died in the incident, while the co-pilot has been rescued. Russia and Turkey have a long history of tense relations, and the incident exposes 2 competing alliances seeking to dominate the region. Russia and Shiite Iran on one hand, and Sunni Turkey on the other. When Putin brought Russia into the Syrian civil war, retired U.S. General Jay Garner told CBN News he introduced a new danger to the region.
In the air, it should be a big problem if he puts fighter aircraft in there and they begin putting airstrikes against rebel forces while we're putting in airstrikes against Assad forces. How do you deconflict all that? And it's a tinderbox.
For now, it remains to be seen if the spark from this incident will set the tinderbox in the region on fire. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I think that Putin is a master poker player. He's trying to bluff. He hasn't got much. His economy is in shatters. If we would maintain the sanctions and step up any kind of military buildup, if we'd put some decent armament in for the Ukrainian rebels, and we'd also remember those people in the Baltics that are, on the front line in regard to Russia, if we would let them know that we're with them. But we can't have this leading from behind stuff. The whole world is crying for leadership, just crying for leadership. And nobody resents the United States being the leader. They're all asking for it. But do we have it? Well, it doesn't seem that way. Because despite terrorist attacks in Paris, President Obama doesn't have any new plans for taking on the brutal killers of ISIS. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau.
Pat, nothing new. Rather, the president is promising the U.S. will offer more of the same in the fight against ISIS, even after French President Hollande's White House visit. And that, again, has some critics saying Mr. Obama isn't doing enough to defeat radical Islamists in Syria and Iraq. Jennifer Wishon brings us that story from the White House.
As prosecutors learned the man believed to be behind the terror attacks in Paris was planning another suicide bombing in the city, French President François Hollande lobbied President Obama at the White House for the military might only the U.S. can provide.
It is about taking out their financing, hunting down their leaders, dismantling their networks, and taking back the land they currently control.
This week, President Obama will sign legislation sustaining American support to France and the 65 nations working together to stop ISIS. He also wants the European Union to require airlines to share passenger information, a move designed to stop terrorists from entering countries undetected.
Make no mistake, we will win, and groups like ISIL will lose.
But for many Americans, simply sustaining America's current fight isn't enough. The president is facing increased pressure to accelerate his efforts to destroy the Islamic State, as a majority of Americans now fear a terrorist attack inside the U.S. is likely within a matter of months. Even if America were attacked, national security expert James Carafano says he's not sure the president would change his strategy. And power, or lack thereof, he says, is the only thing ISIS understands.
You have to look at it from ISIS' perspective. I mean, they live in a part of the world where honor equals power. You're a powerful person, you're respected not because you're a nice guy and pay your taxes, but because you have power and you're willing to use it. And that really is the coin of the realm.
In this war, Carafano says the two enemies bring different perspectives of success.
Obama says, you know, it's this kind of slow, contain, run them down kind of strategy. And the ISIS strategy is, well, as long as we're standing and the black flag is flying, we're winning.
The president also faces growing concerns from Democrats about his push to let Syrian refugees into the country. He maintains that doing less is un-American.
On the Statue of Liberty, a gift from the people of France. There are words we know so well. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to be free. That's the spirit that makes us American.
In a nation that knows what terror feels like, many Americans are eager to show France they care.
President Obama is going to need to show the same kind of commitment and help that was provided to the United States by many countries after 9/11. We had that after 9/11, and we need to show it to other countries.
That opportunity comes next week, when more than 120 world leaders will meet in Paris for a climate summit. Obama and Hollande agree attendance is the best possible response to the Islamic State's attacks. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Thanks, Jennifer. A new FBI alert is urging caution as Americans plan to celebrate Thanksgiving, warning of the potential for copycat terror in the wake of the Paris and Mali attacks. And some people are facing another major roadblock in their travel plans: snow. Heather Sells has the story.
More than 46 million Americans are expected to travel by car, plane, bus, or train this week, the most Thanksgiving travelers since 2007.
But in the wake of terror attacks in Paris and around the world, the FBI has issued an alert warning of the potential for copycat terror here at home.
The FBI warning involves beefing up security at softer targets like malls, trains, and airports across the country.
We have to go through the protocols because you never know. The bad guys only have to be right once. And that's something that we have to guard against constantly.
Authorities have not identified any specific terror plot and don't believe that ISIS has sent a cell from Syria to the U.S. like it did in Paris. But many of the country's 18,000 law enforcement agencies are stepping up their security, and the FBI is focusing on a group of ISIS followers here in the U.S. with suspects under 24-hour surveillance. For travelers out west this week, snow may prove more dangerous than any other threat.
Heading up 80 is not not the safest drive, especially going over Donner Pass.
It was a pain. With the condition like this, it's hard.
A storm in Northern California is bringing much-needed snow to the drought-starved region, but also causing all kinds of delays. The main problem, spin-outs on slick and icy roads, forcing many drivers to resort to chains and severely reduce their speed. Heather Sell, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. The Paris terror attacks ignited a worldwide debate over Syrian refugees stretching from Europe to America, where even some governors are trying to block them from entering their states. CBN's Operation Blessing is on the ground in war-torn Syria and brings us a voice missing from the debate. As Ephraim Graham reports, it's the voice of those fleeing for their lives.
Refugees are front-page news, and the headlines only increased. Following reports, authorities found a Syrian passport near an assailant killed in the deadly Paris attacks.
You know, we're hearing stories about ISIS infiltration and all that, and I think that's good that we're aware of these possible problems.
Operation Blessing President Bill Horan recently witnessed the refugee crisis firsthand. He stood at the border of Hungary and Croatia, where thousands arrived, having crossed 9 borders to reach that point.
You have been on the front lines now. What are we not hearing? What are we not seeing?
We're certainly only seeing one side of the story. And the side of the story that I keep noticing that's being left out is the story from the perception of the refugees. The vast majority of these folks, at least the ones that we've interacted with, that we met, that we talked to while we were over there, they're not terrorists at all.
These are some of the faces. Photographs taken by Operation Blessing's David Dark, who spent time talking to those whose images he captured.
They said we had 3 choices. We could either be conscripted into the Assad regime and fight for Assad, or we have to fight for ISIS, forced to fight for ISIS, or we can just stay here and be killed. So when we see these attacks happening in Paris and all this terror happening around the world, we need to understand that's the very terror that these people are running from, not running towards.
There are many young men among those running, and it's no accident. That's a blessing Bill learned talking to a 27-year-old Syrian Christian whose family pooled their money to send him.
He said, I went to the meeting. I did not volunteer to leave my home and come to Germany. I was chosen by the family as the one most likely to make it across 9 borders, across a 17-hour ride in a rubber boat from Turkey to Greece. He said, I was seasick for 17 hours and I was sure I was going to die. He said, we were all praying out loud, praying to the Lord just to get us to the other side. He said, many people drowned on the way.
So it's essentially desperation is where they're leaving. They're fleeing.
They're leaving out of desperation, of course.
Still, not everyone is able to flee. That's why Operation Blessing isn't just stopping at the border.
We're actually working inside Syria. We've got partners that are inside Syria, in the northeastern part of Syria, the area that is still safe from ISIS, at least now, because the Kurds are defending that area. There are Syrians that are there, Christian Syrians that speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thank you, Ephraim Pat. So many stories of desperation and urgent need.
The thing you got to remember is Operation Blessing was there. This isn't part of the hype. The trouble is the hype now is you've got to be against refugees. And if you're not against refugees, somehow you're not a good Republican, or you're not conservative, or you don't like America or something. These people are hurting, and our guys were there with them. And the ones they talked to, a lot of them are Christian. And they just have to get out or get killed. I mean, that's what Bill Horan was saying, and he's there. He's there talking to them, and we're working now in northern Syria. But, ladies and gentlemen, what Operation Blessing is doing, you're giving food, you got plastic tarps to keep them warm, you've got clothing, you have other things that they desperately need, and we're there for them. So that's what Operation Blessing does, is to help people. But it does seem to me like there's so many Christians and so many people who love freedom in that group that they themselves could do some checking on which in that group are actually ISIS sympathizers and supporters. And they could help the authorities identify those people. But really, they don't belong in America. That's not their destination. They should be resettled close in the Middle East where they have the roots and where they've been for so many years. And there has to be some effort to do that. But this is a humanitarian tragedy of massive proportion. And if you want to help, by the way, Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, and we're there, folks. We're there on the scene where those people are and where they're hurting. So all you got to do, pick up your phone or log in on the internet, and there's the number and there's the address. But we're not going to let those people starve. We got to do something to help them.
You know, it sure does put a different face on the refugee crisis when you see that story.
Well, they've talked. I mean, Bill talks to these people. They've actually interviewed them. They know the heart and the people. They're just crying out. We had to flee, and that one young man said, out of his family, they took up an offering, and his cost. I mean, those traffickers are charging $9,000, $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 to get them across the water, and the reason so many young men are coming is because their families say you're the only ones that can survive this ordeal to get to the other side.
Yeah, that's a story we haven't heard. Thanks, Pat.
I know.